now start with the second session for the day. The session is chaired by Ms. Samhita, Managing Director, Ella Green Buildings and Infrastructure Private Limited, Chennai. Ms. Samhita has been in the green and sustainability space for over 15 years and is an adherent advocate of sustainable living. An architect from Anna University, Samhita's expertise lies in planning green and energy efficiency building solutions. Prior to starting Ella, she worked with Ashok Leyland Properties and the CIA Green Business Center, Hyderabad, where she was associated with all the prestigious projects of CII, ranging from developing of green building rating systems and formulating framework for certification of green buildings. Over the last decade, she has trained more than 8,000 professionals in the field of energy efficiency in buildings and green buildings. Some of the clients under her leadership include Infosys, Microsoft, ITC, Coal India, Symbiosis, and many more. She has worked with 5 state governments towards implementation of the Energy Conservation Building Code. She has been also awarded the Telangana State Energy Conservation Award in recognition of her contribution towards energy conservation practice in the state. She founded Ella Green School in 2018 in Chennai with the prime focus of sowing seeds of sustainability in children at an earlier stage. Today, Ella Green School is IB authorized and caters to more than 250 students. Today, ma'am is here to enhance our knowledge about green buildings and certification. Now I invite Ms. Samhita to take over the session. We welcome you, ma'am.
A very good morning to one and all. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. So I'm really looking forward to an interactive session today. And since the topic is on green buildings, I thought I'd cover a lot about what is happening, what are the current trends, and also on what is the key elements, what has driven this whole green system, and what is the design process. So I'll just share my screen. Give me a second, please. Yeah. So the whole thing is, suppose if in the process you find there is some lagging or disturbance in the sound, please let me know immediately. So, I can see what needs to be done. So when I say green buildings, it's normally synonymous with sustainable buildings, but green is only a subset of sustainability. All of us know sustainability is a larger concept where we're looking at the community, the social aspects, environmental aspects, whereas green focuses only on the environmental aspects. But I would also like to touch upon how building has a larger impact on people who occupy it, on people who work in it, and also in the design process. So I'll talk a little bit, and a lot will be based on my experience. So it's not going to be completely any textbook knowledge. So you can let me know and stop me then and there if you think, there are certain points to be added or revised. So the first and foremost thing is...
Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt. Ma'am, your voice has certain deviations, ma'am. At certain point, it moves very low.
Can I switch off my video? That means, normally, once I switch off my video, it gets better. Is that okay?
Ma'am, your voice is alone low, ma'am.
I said, can I switch off my video?
Okay, ma'am.
Is it better now? Am I more audible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, normally there's a lag between the video and audio.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So yeah, predominantly, we spend a lot of time inside a building. 3/4 of the day we spend inside a building. And therefore, it is important for us to focus on how the building is designed, how is it built, how is it operating for us. And now post the pandemic, we spend almost all the time in the day. It's not even like we are not stepping out of our houses. So it is important how we look at the building. And if you actually see the current statistics, 1/3 of the global energy is consumed by buildings, which means 33.33% of energy is consumed by just the buildings. Only after that, you have the remaining 70% or 68% which is taken by transportation, industries, and others. So building forms a sizable chunk, out of which less than 5% of the buildings are high performance. So you can, we see the scope for energy efficiency, we see the scope for green sustainability in this sector, which is huge. So how do we look at it? So one is, there is an existing building stock, okay, where we've already built a huge, large chunk of buildings, and how do we look at those buildings? And the next is, how do we look at new buildings? So based on a lot of statistics on how we project the construction sector, there is a lot of buildings yet to be built. A large, at least 60% of the buildings in 2030, they say, is yet to be built at the rate we are constructing or going about with construction of new projects. So there are two approaches to looking at it. One is, how do we look at existing buildings, and how do we design new buildings? So in existing buildings, again, it's very limited. There's not much you can do because a lot has been spent, the building has been constructed. So we can only focus on the operations, how we set targets, minimize our energy consumption, resource consumption, and how do we track performance. So I mean, I think we have a lot of people who have said what can be tracked can be improved, what can be measured can be improved. So that would be the approach to existing buildings. But what we are going to focus on today is, how do we look at the new building stock? Because we as engineers, as architects, as designers of the future, have a big role to play in the new buildings. So this is where we bring in a collaborative approach. See, in every building, not just one expert is required, right? We have the civil engineer, we have the architect, we have the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, landscape, interiors. There are so many specialists, who contractor, so many people who actually work together, and each one is an expert in their own field. But what happens is, they bring in their expertise without looking at the interrelationships between the other experts. And that is where our buildings are not optimized to be fully sustainable. So this whole green buildings and sustainable design, the rating systems and the various codes that exist today have been able to enable this interactive process or the collaborative process. So this is where we collaborate, sit at the design table and understand the design. Then we predict savings. Today we have a lot of technology available to us to actually analyze how our building will perform in terms of water, in terms of energy, in terms of resources, carbon. There are so many analyses that can be done scientifically, backed by scientific analysis. So we predict savings, and this is how we optimize. So while we do this process, we are getting the best possible outcome at the least possible cost. So when people say, building green is going to cost more, no. I'll tell you how. As we go through case studies, I will actually tell you all how it doesn't, because see, when you're doing high performance glass, which is going to increase your costing, your heat gain into the building comes down because it's better glass. When your heat gain comes down, what happens? Your chiller sizing also will come down. So actually, if you look at the building in its totality, you will be able to offset certain costs, and therefore there is, if you design it well with all the expertise, collaborating well, then you don't have to look at your first cost increase. So the most important component of any green building is to have the integrated design process. So integrated design process, and this happens with the help of building codes and rating systems, because we have a checklist in front of us. We're able to, it becomes a design tool. It becomes a tool where we are able to follow certain parameters to follow the approach. And then the last component, looking at building audits and performance, this is for existing buildings. So these are the three components that we can look at from being professionals. And this way we focus on the people who are impacted by the design process, the people who use the building, the visitors, etc. The profit also, because we are understanding how much we are spending and how much we can save. So if you are saving 40% energy.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, your voice is really low, ma'am.
My voice is low. Is it been low all the time or it keeps going on and off?
Ma'am, it is keep on going low, ma'am.
Just give me a second.
Okay, ma'am.
Is it okay now?
Now it is okay, ma'am.
Okay. So what I was saying is we're looking at the three ground rules of sustainability where we focus on people, profit predominantly because, if you are saving, let's say 40% energy savings, that means if your energy bills are 10 lakhs, you can imagine how much you'll be saving 4 lakhs every month, or 4 lakhs every, whatever your size of the building, whatever your energy consumption is. Then ultimately, we're also looking at the environment. We're looking at how is it impacting our resources, how we consume our resources. And of course, I did mention about people. The occupant health has become a very important parameter today. How comfortable are people within your building? So the effect of design, if we look at it, we're looking at reducing our carbon footprint. Today, a lot of discussion is happening. I think even, in fact, with all these, the Montreal Protocol, and now today we have the COP summit happening in Glasgow in the next week. There's a lot being committed by various countries towards reducing carbon footprint, and the built-up space is no less. And how we adopt sustainable practices. One is the practices per se, like, having the collaborative approach, having experts discuss. And how do we incorporate green technology? Today, we have technology available. Today, we have precast, we have 3D monolithic structures, we have 3D printing technology, we have, you have name it and you have technology available. How do we incorporate all of that to achieve not only the least negative impact? Earlier, when the whole discussion on green building started, maybe in 2000, early 2000s, the focus was on providing the least negative impact on the environment. Today, we are moving on to how can buildings even create a positive impact on the environment. So there is a shift in the way we're looking at things. So let me start with the first and foremost, why it's very important is the building codes and ratings and policies today have taken a new dimension. We have the Bureau of Energy Efficiency that has mandated the energy code across various states in the country. Tamil Nadu is also on the verge of making it mandatory. So all your buildings will comply with code. There are green building rating systems which are also voluntary in nature, but various state governments have made that into a policy where you have extra FSI or some tax incentives. All of this have come into place. I'll discuss a bit about what is happening in the country with reference to that. And then we'll go on to the design approach. So the first part will be on the building codes. What are the rating systems that are available in India? And I will stress upon the Energy Conservation Building Code. What is the effects of regulation and policies? So as I said, the integrated design approach is one important parameter that has been brought about thanks to policies and regulations. Market transformation, and what is the opportunities that exist for professionals or students who are graduating. So if you look at government codes and policies, the first and foremost is, when there is a power shortage, what do we do? First and foremost, we will start blaming the government. We'll say, how can they not give us energy supply, power supply? But do we realize that the way we are going on increasing our demand, there is only that much of coal reserves available to us to generate power. We are largely a coal-based energy economy. So how can the government go on supplying without, addressing the demand side measures? So actually, the Energy Conservation Act of 2001, which was launched by the Ministry of Power, Government of India, has been the first step in India towards focusing on the demand side measures. So that's when the Bureau of Energy Efficiency was created in 2007, and they launched the Energy Conservation Building Code. Okay, this is the first Government of India's first step towards focusing on demand side measures in the building sector. And now we have the this is for commercial buildings. Now we have residential buildings code. A lot has happened from in the last decade with reference to the code. But prior to this, simultaneously, a lot of green building rating systems also have gained prevalence in the country. And the most predominant, it started with the LEED rating system, which was adopted by the Indian Green Building Council. Today, LEED is managed only by the US Green Building Council. We have IGBC, which is being managed by the Indian Green Building Council. There are other rating systems also like EDGE, which is by the International Finance Corporation. There's GRIHA by the GRIHA Secretariat, which is also managed by TERI. We have Green Star and BREEAM, which is, you know, fairly not really caught up in India, but some projects have adopted it. Green Star is from Australia, BREEAM is from UK. And yeah, the recent development, if you look at it, in 2017, the revised version of the ECBC has been launched. So that is something that you can download from the BE website and refer. I'll also talk a bit about it because we may not have a full session to, I mean, it requires a lot more to do. So if you look at the certification bodies in India, we have the GBCI, which is the Green Business Certification Inc., which propagates LEED, the PEER rating system. PEER is for the electrical systems. SITES is for site-related, you know, if you want a large park or large SEZ certified, you can look at SITE. There is ParkSmart for multi-level car parking. So there are different rating systems that are being managed by GBCI. IGBC also has a whole plethora of ratings. To name the building type, it could be a railway station, it could be a metro, it could be service buildings, it could be factories, homes. Every type of building, there is a rating system. GRIHA, for that matter, has only 3 categories, which is the main GRIHA rating, which is applicable for all commercial buildings. There is a SWAGRIHA, which is for smaller buildings less than 2,500 square meters. And there's a GRIHA LD, which is for larger developments, you know, like an SEZ, or there are multiple buildings on campus, then GRIHA LD will become applicable. Of course, Green Star and BREEAM are some other rating systems that are applicable globally, not so much in India. And there is Living Building Challenge also. So, like I said, this is what is being focused in India. Majority is going with these rating systems, because we have offices. If there are queries, questions, you can reach out to various people. It becomes easier for us to adopt. Okay. I am not going into detail into all this, but EDGE is catching up a lot in India right now. It is mandated by the International Finance Corporation and managed by GBCI and SGS. These are 2 organizations that monitor EDGE in India. There's SITES, there is WELL rating system also, which focuses on the health and well-being of occupants. There is zero waste for waste management also. We have a rating system called TRUE, and for parking buildings. It's important to know, because tomorrow, you know, there are a lot of these examinations which qualify you as, you know, a sustainability professional. So it's good to know what is happening in the current scenario. As I mentioned, IGBC has you know, this is probably not an exhaustive list, but yes, if you're looking at a campus, a residential building, an SEZ, villages, today villages are certified green, hospitals, interiors. So you name it, and there are different, you can go through. IGBC website has a lot of details as well. And as I mentioned, GRIHA has 3 categories only, unlike IGBC or GBCI. We have the SWAGRIHA, which is for smaller buildings. The GRIHA, it's basically green for integrated habitat assessment. Okay, that is the long form. And GRIHA LD for larger buildings of greater than 1,50,000 square meters. Basically 15 lakh square feet and greater, you have a larger rating. Like I mentioned earlier, there is the green building rating systems, which are holistic in nature. We talk about energy, water, site, materials, resources, indoor environmental quality. There are a lot of parameters that a green building rating system covers. But on the contrary, there is this code called the Energy Conservation Building Code. This is mandated by the government of India, whereas systems are by private organizations or NGOs or they are not government backed. Whereas the ECBC is backed by the government, by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and buildings being a state subject, it becomes the responsibility of every state to mandate. So right now about 16 states have mandated it. Tamil Nadu will have to mandate it soon. So everybody has to do it at some point. So what is the criteria here is any building with a load, connected load of 100 kilowatt or more, or a contract demand of 120 kVA or more. Any of these two criteria, then any commercial building will fall under the ECBC and has to comply with the code. Now, ECBC is nothing but the Energy Conservation Building Code and focuses only on energy. Unlike green, where you focus on site, water, rainwater, materials, all of that, ECBC is focused primarily on energy, and it only provides a guide or a benchmark for minimum performance. Whereas green building recognizes excellent performance, where you go over and beyond the benchmark. Whereas ECBC just sets the basic benchmark. So if you look at the salient features of ECBC, one, it defines minimum efficiency standards. So it can be in terms of how well your thermal properties of your wall, roof, or it can be your air conditioning systems. What is the efficiency of the air conditioning systems or lighting, renewable systems. So that it looks at the energy components of every aspect of the building design. Now, this is where, we need to understand that it is not one person's expertise. Normally, when they say building design, they will say it is the architect's scope, or the architect will say that is MEP, that is not my scope. Unless everybody understands the basics of every part of the building, it is impossible to achieve the best outcome. So this is where when I'm training students, I tell them it's important that they understand, even architects have to understand heat load calculation, have to understand the basic principles of heat gain into a building. Only then will we be able to guide the team for a holistic approach. So one is minimum efficiency standards. Second is integrated design approach. Now, why I'm also stressing a lot on the Energy Conservation Building Code is because there will be an examination that is shortly going to be launched, which is for the building professionals, those who want to get into this space by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and those who, it's a very tough exam. It is going to be an open book exam, and those who qualify this exam will be, will work with governments closely to, probably verify the code compliance. So each state government will have different criteria, but they all have to qualify the basic exam by Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which will be launched anytime this year. So that's why it's important that, we sensitize people on this, so we have enough players in the field. Most often than not, all these exams that are launched, be energy auditors or ECBC master trainers, all of them, the concentration is mostly in North India. And we have very few people in South India, which makes it very complex for people to adopt on a large scale. This is why I also in my training stress on the need for people from the South also to participate in these processes. So the next important point being integrated design approach, I spoke about it. I'll also talk a lot more when we go into case studies. And most importantly, earlier, prior to ECBC, prior to 2007, there was no code in India that we could follow to comply with energy for buildings. So we ended up following an American code, American Society of Heating and Refrigeration, ASHRAE code, which puts the entire India in one climatic zone. So we know that buildings in Kanyakumari are going to be different from buildings in the east or in Kashmir or anywhere else. So therefore, our basic assumption itself becomes wrong, because whole of India cannot be in one climate zone, right? So this code clearly defines India into 5 broad climatic zones. You can look into it more in the website. There are more details. And yes, it's a first generation code, so it will be subject to continuous updates, and it's important for us to be up to date with the current trends. So what are the buildings that have to comply under ECBC? All kinds of buildings which are not residential, which are not industrial. Okay. Please note, residential buildings have a different code. Industrial buildings have a lot of process loads So, building loads become a smaller component, so a different set of rules will apply. So those two are exempt, but any other building, hospitals, there was a question when we started, talking about this. There was a question where, projects came back and said, this is a government hospital, it does not come under commercial building. No, any hospital will come under hospitality, star hotels, service apartments. They will come under shopping complexes, public assembly spaces. So some projects like temples said, we are not eligible. No, even if it's a temple, if it's air conditioned, comes under 100 kilowatt connected load, it will comply under, it has to. So any public assembly space, it can be a theater, it can be multiplex, office buildings, colleges, universities, all of them will come under this. So quick understanding for our purpose, what is the difference between the Energy Conservation Building Code and a green building rating? Like I said, ECBC is mandatory. It is backed by the government. It is a regulation, and it is only limited to energy efficiency. Whereas green building ratings are voluntary in nature. They cover all other aspects of green, okay? And it strives for excellence. It's not a benchmark for basic performance. It looks for beyond better performance, and it is not backed by the government, okay? So I'll just talk about, what is, like I said, right, in an integrated design approach, all the experts sit together. So you have a holistic approach, you understand the building in its totality. You will know if I have 60% of glass on my facade, I will know this is my air conditioning system, this is how my lighting system, because I'll have adequate daylight, therefore my artificial lights will reduce. So you understand the building from the site perspective, from the internal components perspective. A lot of the holistic approach is followed. You have a collaborative approach because you're working with all the experts. So when we have done projects, we even sat with the contractors and explained to them. Then there is a design charrette. A design charrette is when you actually, remember I told you in my first slides where we do a scientific analysis. So based on various design inputs of the experts, we actually see, suppose if somebody says add a roof insulation. Now by adding roof insulation, are we saving 3% savings? Is there 6% energy savings? So if the savings are negligible, then we don't have to spend extra on a roof insulation. So these kind of analysis, it will help us do if we sit together in the. So market transformation, I can tell you for sure, because this has been a relatively new industry starting from the early 2000s, from which I have been a part of. So from how buildings have evolved from basically a substandard performance to, having this typical green building practices to becoming, innovators. Today we have buildings that are, net zero. There's so much of passive design that goes in, combined with innovation. Insulation is being used predominantly across buildings, especially in hot and humid climates. So the market transformation in the last, let's say 15, 20 years has been tremendous. And the availability of building products, that is critical. Earlier, if you go and ask, when I was doing my green buildings for various projects earlier, I used to go and ask for manufacturer of paints, do you have low VOC paints? They won't even know what it meant when you speak to vendors, suppliers. And today you have Shah Rukh Khan on ads saying, we have low VOC paints. So that is the market shift that has happened. People have caught on, people understand what is important, what is environmentally sustainable. So the availability of insulation is easily available. Low flow fixtures, plumbing fixtures, waterless urinals. Before all this had to be imported. So this is an example. Earlier, manufacturers and vendors, if you ask them recycled content, they will say, no, madam, there is no recycled content in our product. But they didn't realize it was actually good to have an element of recycled content. So all that has shifted today. It's much easier for us. There are new professions. We have ECBC consultants, energy simulation. Before, in 2000, there were probably a handful of people who could do energy simulation, who could use softwares appropriately. Today, we do trainings, we have engineers, we have graduate students who are doing all of this. There are third-party assessors. So, for example, in Telangana, ECBC is implemented, and there are a list of identified third-party assessors who the government reaches out for code compliance. So there are a lot of new professions that have come up, and the government incentives today. If you look at the various states that have already mandated measures, Kerala has recently announced additional FAR. West Bengal already has additional FAR for IGBC and green certified projects. For Griha, Maharashtra has announced something. Then even in Himachal Pradesh, Punjab. So all these states have had some policies which encourage the adoption of green building practices. So I'm going to move into our case studies part where we understand, how buildings are designed, what is the need for green buildings, and how the design per se has an impact. So I did talk about the integrated design approach. What are we looking at by achieving collaborative design approach? One is you're looking at integration of technologies. I did mention this earlier also. Today we have so many technologies available with us, even in the mechanical, electrical, civil construction. So how do we integrate all of them? Suppose we are using precast. Will that restrict us in terms of, say insulation, or will that restrict us? So unless we sit together with experts, we will not know. Where specialists work together. We also need to understand how the climate, the microclimate, the environmental factors of the site impact the building. I mean, how many of us actually start with the climate study and move on to your design process? Most of it, when we start doing a project, it's all rule of thumb, it's all what we know earlier. But there is an element of study, analysis, research. And we also look at the building components, like I said, chiller, glass, lighting, interiors. You have lighter interiors, there's more reflection of interior lighting. Landscape has an impact on your energy around the building, on heat island effect. So I'll talk about this in our case studies. And most importantly, we're looking to achieve innovation. So if you look at the site level, we start with the climate analysis. We look at the orientation, how the sun path analysis happens. So what is the facade that has to have glass, the facade that minimizes glass. We look at wind direction, especially if the building is a mixed mode, or where there is corridor spaces or naturally ventilated spaces. It's important to capture the draft, the topography of the land. Then we look into views, the connectivity of the building to the external environment. Today we understand that is very important, right? I don't know how many of you have heard of this terminology called ICU psychosis. People in the ICU, apart from the physical illness, also have a problem because they are mentally not able to connect to the outside. They do not know whether it's day or night. So that is a terminology. So it's important when people sit in an office building to be able to connect to the outside, understand the landscape. So all this becomes a part of the site. Then we move on to the building per se, which is where we look at, the energy simulation. We look at shading, the microclimatic factors, such as microclimate is the smaller climatic factors that are around the site. One is the larger climate for the location. The next is, suppose you're situated near a park or near a water body. Is there elements that you can utilize in your design? Then we look at building materials. What is the kind of insulation, thermal properties, passive design, the air conditioning, lighting, ventilation, all these parameters become the building design component. So these are constantly interacting with each other. And the last element is looking at post-occupancy. Once your building is operational, is it functioning in the designed fashion? In the fashion that you have designed, is it working towards that? So there is a behavioral pattern that you need to understand, what is the maintenance, what is the performance monitoring, and then of course a course correction if required. So today a lot is being spoken about net zero. Net zero is nothing but moving towards a completely self-sufficient energy supply system where you don't depend on the grid, where we're looking at solar or any form of renewable source. But again, net zero does not mean you just design a building and then you complement it with solar power. That is not net zero. There is an approach towards it. That's why we designers use the term towards net zero, because net zero is the final outcome, But towards net zero is what we call as a trias energetica approach, where it's a three-pronged strategy, where first we look at the design per se. How is your architectural design? Are there any passive measures? So the primary goal of the architect, what would it be? To design a space that is closest to thermal comfort condition, right? And so if suppose my temperature is 40 degrees and peak summer, and my building by design is say 35 degrees, then your air conditioning systems will have to cool temperature from 35 to 25 and not from 40 to 25. So basically how your design is done. Next is you further bridge it by air conditioning high efficient systems. So say you are able to achieve 35 degrees, but that is still not comfortable. So you use mechanical systems. And how do you make sure they are efficient, highly efficient mechanical systems? And then finally, we're looking to bridge it with renewable energy. So this is what is a three-pronged approach that we look at towards net zero. I'm just talking basically about concepts so that we understand green in its holistic perspective. Now, the first step that we do towards design, when we start our design, you can be an HVAC, MEP, architect, anybody. We need to define the goals for the project team, right? We need to understand what is our primary goals towards sustainability also. While you say, I want my building to look, futuristic, or I want it housing 100 people, there are lots of goals that you have. But also in terms of sustainability, what is it that we are looking at? So once we finalize those, that's why I say, whether it's minimal first cost, or you're looking at completely supply of grid power, or if you're looking at, making it a interactive building where it becomes a textbook for, it is an educational building. So all this we sit and fine tune at the design stage, and then we understand how we can go about. So always I tell, wherever I go, the starting point becomes climate, right? Climate dictates every aspect of our life. And for years, it has always dictated building design or architecture. And what is happening is it's not like we are not looking at it right now, but in the need for technology, in the need for quick construction practices, we have a lot of constraints in terms of space. Like earlier, Golconda, if you see, the Golconda Fort has walls which are 12, 15 feet thick. Today, we do not have the luxury of using that kind of materials, using that kind of space. Carpet area is so important in today's modern technology. That is what is critical, and that is where the green building rating systems or your code, all of that come into play. So if you look at our ancient buildings, which is where we derive our buildings today, our inspiration of today's buildings as well, has always been environmental, cultural, and social factors. So, environmental factors have always played a role in the design of buildings. And now we can do it with a more scientific approach. And this also bridges the gap between architects and engineers. See, most often than not, when we come up with a design, you're able to tell, as an architect, I mean, I've been in both sides of the spectrum. I've been, being a green building consultant, I have to know the engineering part. And I also work with architects. So what happens is the architect talks about various parameters where the engineer is unable to comprehend because you're not backing it with numbers. There is no, the design is more, looks as a subjective matter. So today we have various software tools where we can objectively talk about the design. So this is where, in fact, if you see the images down is for one of the university blocks in Hyderabad, where we did just the basic sun path analysis once the architect gave their basic design. So we look at the sun, we look at wind, we look at the temperature of the location, we look at the relative humidity and the microclimate. So as I said, microclimate is how is the site located, where is the site located. Relative humidity, of course, most passive measures can address temperature, but relative humidity is quite difficult. I mean, having done a lot of buildings in this part in Chennai, we understand that humidity is very difficult to address unless you are able to have active systems. So when we say we start a building, the primary goal would be is to how do we design the structure which is closest to thermal comfort, right? So when we do that, how can we do it? There are various ways in which we can do it. Like I said, the first step would be to look at the building. The next step would be to look at its systems, which is the mechanical systems, air conditioning, lighting, all of electrical, and then finally renewable, right? So first step would be, how can we bring in modulations to bring the building closest to thermal comfort? So again, this is purely based on my experience. Feel free to say otherwise. We've realized that landscape plays an important role. Okay, as much as it's always an afterthought, or it's something that is done much later after the building is constructed. Also, it is important that we look at it at the design stage. WWR is nothing but the window to wall ratio, which is how much of glass on your facade actually decides how much of heat you're allowing into the building. Glass is a wonderful medium. We need glass because we need to connect to the outside. We need daylighting. We need all of that. But at the same time, we also have to minimize our heat gain. So optimizing on the window to wall ratio is critical. Thirdly, shading devices. In a country like ours, in tropical climates, what happens is the maximum heat gain comes into a building because of direct sun's radiation on the glass. So how do we cut down the direct sun's radiation? Predominantly, there are two ways. One is you use glass, property of glass, which has a low solar heat gain coefficient. That is, the property of the glass cuts down heat gain into the building. Or you use shading devices as well, or a combination of both. So shading devices become a critical component in analyzing our design. We're looking at materials. Materials as in, what is the thermal property? Are you using regular brick? Are you using fly ash? Are we using insulation? Are we using aerocon bricks? So there are various properties that each material has. And how do we analyze before we finalize on what material we are going to use? Then the most important of it all is your building planning. So again, please do not think this is only for architects. It is important that every building professional understands all these parameters so that everybody can add value to the design process. So most importantly, when you can actually break it down, of course, building plan is a very it's a long drawn process. It takes in a lot of parameters. But if you look at three predominant parameters, the function, shape, and orientation have a large impact on the building performance. So I'll talk about how function, shape, and orientation actually play a role through case studies. Otherwise, it's difficult. So looking at the first component, like that I said, landscape. Carefully positioned trees. Again, this is from the US Department of Energy. They say carefully positioned trees, if it's a ground plus one structure, up to 25% of the energy consumption in a household can be reduced. And if you actually measure temperature around in the same location under a tree and over the black tar top road, you will find a good 14 degrees Celsius difference. So, and this we've done it also. We've done an experiment to see what is actually possible. These are some of the buildings that integrate landscape into the building facades, and how we can do it, because again, we are also water. We need to conserve our water, and how do we choose the right species? How do we go about this? Whether treated water, all of this becomes an important part while we design our landscape. And most importantly, landscape reduces or mitigates what is known as the heat island effect. I don't know how many of you all know what is the heat island effect. Heat island effect is, if you all have gone to temples, you will know they would have painted a white paint. On that white paint, you will be able to walk. Whereas on the black tar road, you will not be able to walk. Why? Because a lot of heat is being absorbed by the black surfaces or the built-up surfaces. And what happens? When the temperatures drop, the surfaces that have absorbed all the heat will slowly emanate the heat back into the atmosphere. So net result, there will always be a constant increased temperature around your building. That's why if you go into a park, you will feel the temperature drop. Whereas you go into a open parking lot, or if you go into a concrete jungle, you will feel temperatures rise. So to avoid this, a lot of greenery, landscape, reflective surfaces, all this needs to be planned at the design stage. Now, the second thing that I spoke about is, I said about the building planning and built form, right? See, most importantly, we have to look at a plan which places functions in locations that minimize need for applied energy. What does this mean? Suppose I have an auditorium, suppose it's an education institution, and I have an auditorium. Auditorium is a space where I don't need I don't need daylight. I'm going to use artificial lights because it's a performing space. Now that space, if I put it in the periphery of the building, then I have not done justice to my design, right? I'd rather have classrooms on the periphery where a lot of daylight and views are required, whereas I can put the auditorium in a. So how do you functionally place spaces within a building is critical. How does a shape that encourages use of daylight, orientation I spoke about, right? East and west has maximum exposure to the sunlight. So we would want to minimize the east and west facades if possible, if we had the option to play with the site. We would want to minimize the glass in those facades. And as I said, window to wall ratio. Again, building plan, if just to give you an example, if you look at this building plan, this is the Symbiosis University building plan. And the entire building is planned over a water body, a central water body. And also the wind analysis study is done so that the air coming into the classrooms pre-cools over the water and then enters. If you see these square blocks, no, there are 4 classrooms together facing a central courtyard. So you see how every space is open. This is again a naturally ventilated building, and air conditioned spaces are put in the 2 box. The computer labs, the administrative block, all of that go air conditioning and allow for cross ventilation. This is Coal India Corporate Office building here. If you look at this building, the architect for this was Rajawal Associates. And if you see the depth, the deep portion that you see in this side, that is the open office area. If you see the depth of the floor plate, no, how well it has been designed to ensure that there is daylight penetration from both sides. So you have courtyards in the center, the 2 courtyards, and then you have the floor plate is at a certain depth to allow for daylight penetration. And if you also see, the architect would have provided steps. The building itself is in a stepped fashion. Why is that? Because the central court, if he did not do that, if it was a complete cylinder, the daylighting from the central courtyard would have been blocked completely for the lower floors. Right? There is an angle of incidence and the lower floors would have blocked the daylight. So to open up the courtyards and bring in as much daylight as possible, he is given the stepped fashion so that the courtyards are also a little more open. And in fact, if you look at how they've planned, I'll come more into detail of this, how we did the window to wall ratio, all of that will come in. I'll talk in the later slides. But how shape and form is important, that I said. Normally what people do in design is, you'll have a large floor space, you will have, the peripheral areas where glass is given, the cubicles will be placed, and the central space will be your open office. So what happens when majority of the people sit in a building will not have access to views in daylight, because that is your open office, whereas the cubicles will block off all your daylight. So just to understand, just so that you all understand, to see how much daylight can be penetrated from within a specific window. If you see in plan, this is X, the width of the window panel. In section, if you see, the height of the window from the ground level is Y. if you actually see in plan, what is the floor area that daylight, that window will provide as daylight, you take 1 meter on either side of this window and do a 2 into y. That is what the depth, that is the amount of floor area that will have daylight. So you will know by design, this is just a rule of thumb thing. There are a lot of softwares that can actually analyze and tell you exactly, but if you're quickly doing a sketch or an analysis for you to understand how much windows to provide or what is the daylight, you can do this. So I'm just showing you how, there was a lot of scientific thought behind the Symbiosis building, the form, how it was arrived, the classroom's positioning, shape, all of this, how it was arrived at. This is just to show you a 3D view. You'd see the classrooms having central courtyard, the classroom blocks. There'll be daylight windows allowing into workshop spaces, solar panels installed in one of the blocks. So just if you see a cross section, how the water body actually acts as a form of passive measure, where the warm wind from the west will cool over the water body and enter the classrooms. I did mention about orientation. So we're looking at minimizing. So we all know, right? Sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Today we have softwares that can actually look at what degree. See, there's a true north, but there's also certain tilt based on the sun path analysis for that particular location. So to that detailing, you will be able to understand once you run your building through an analysis. For example, the Symbiosis building, how we actually oriented the solar panel facade to make sure that even if they don't do solar panels immediately, but at some point later on, if they add, it will be the most effective orientation. Again, this is a CPCL canteen block from Manali CPCL, the Chennai Petroleum site. If you see, the entire building is oriented towards the north. There is a glass facade because they wanted the dining hall to have, adequate lighting and views. So some amount of shading elements have also been planned. So if you look, our energy model will look like this. The building that you see below, this is how our energy model will appear. To understand, what is the savings, what is the consumption, what is the quantum of daylight, all these parameters. So this is an orphanage building, again, orientation completely on the north side, to understand how we can bring down the temperature inside. This is a non-air conditioned building, and this is the first LEED certified, it's actually silver certified orphanage building in the country. And we were able to achieve a 6-degree differential between the outside and inside. We use fly ash blocks as materials. Most importantly, the orientation and shading devices played an important role in this building. Those who have visited Chennai will know this too. I mean, I just do it for showing case studies. Neither of them are my projects or. See, as you drive down towards from the Chennai city to the airport, you will see these two buildings on the left side. Both are of similar size, but for a place like Chennai, which has so much of heat coming into, there's a lot of humidity and high temperatures. We go even up to 42, 44 degrees in summer. And having this amount of glass is actually going to bring in a lot more energy consumption, because your chillers will be oversized. You have to cool the entire space so much more, because heat gain is happening on all 4 sides. So how, just to see a stark contrast between the 2 buildings, a building can be planned with glass, can be planned, but how do we, minimize the window to wall ratio is critical. So this is one of our projects from Hyderabad. Okay. And if you see here, the window to wall ratio, the first option that was given by the architect had only 29% glass. So in this case, they were not able to meet adequate daylighting in the upper floors because of the facade design. So we had to open out and request the architect, and then we did some analysis. Then finally, this option came up, which had 36% window to wall ratio. So this was more ideal, more suitable, because the upper floors were office spaces, as you see in the image, and provides a better space. There's another scenario where the first design came up by the architect. This is Coal India office again, where they had more than 60% glass, And this was an iconic building in Calcutta, again, warm and humid climate zone. And they wanted platinum green building rating. So what happened, what we had to do is tell the architect, that this was, again, you just can't go tell an architect that, bring down the window to wall ratio or change the design. So we go up with, calculations, analysis. The image above you see is the first simulation model. And what was the percentage savings that we were able to achieve, and how platinum would be very difficult if we went with that kind of a design. And then finally, then the architect revised, brought in elements of, ACP panels. So we were able to reduce the window to wall ratio from more than 60% to 38%. Again, for your information, the latest version of the Energy Conservation Building Code, gives us a maximum 40% of window to wall ratio. More than that, there is a penalty in the design. So as I mentioned, there are shading devices that are also need to be planned or designed, not only looking at your glass properties, but how do you plan shading devices? There are various ways and you can do it. For example, you have one horizontal shading device after you've calculated how much direct heat radiation can be cut out, or you can break it up into smaller throughout the glass, which is what we've done in this Shilpa Architects office building. If you see, the shading elements are narrower. Again, how the architect wants to design it in terms of aesthetics is their own concern. But it's important that you do a scientific analysis to understand how much of heat you can cut out. Again, this is Symbiosis administrative block. If you see, they've done a combination of inset windows, fins. So how the architect or the designer wants to do is up to them, but how you integrate it is important. So these are some of the international examples. This building on the left top corner that you see is in Paris. In Paris, they have different climatic conditions. They want to keep the heat inside, and whatever in extreme winter, they want the building warm to keep the heat inside. And in summers, they want the heat from the outside to come in actually, and the daylight. So they have a third skin of the building. If you see the black horizontal portions, they're not fixed panels. They're actually operable louvers, perforated louvers, which open and shut depending on the climatic condition outside. Again, on the right, you see these extra louvers, glass louvers. This is a building in Berlin, which has the third skin again, where these louvers are automated to detect temperature outside and automatically open up. Again, this building down you see, which has a lot of landscape, is also a research building in Berlin. In India also, we have various forms of shading devices that can be integrated. You have fixed perforated screens. Of course, we have a long way to go in terms of automated screens and things like that. But yeah, we have fixed perforated screens or shading elements like this, which can be planned. Like I said, in a building envelope, the maximum heat gain comes in from glass. Okay, this orange portion that you see, more than 50% comes in from glass. Then based on whether you're a high-rise or a flat structure, your walls and roof also play an important part. So it's important we focus on the glass. These are some of our projects. How we do it, again, in terms of materials. You can have a rat trap bond, fly ash bricks. In one project, we used clay tile stuffed with coir as insulation. So how you want to plan, but it's important that we know the thermal properties and how we can minimize heat gain into the building. Most importantly, glass will be our first point of concern. Then we look at walls and roof. I'll just quickly run through some case studies. That, like I mentioned, this is the orphanage. It's a 20,000 square feet building in Hyderabad. Again, all of us know Hyderabad as a composite climate zone. So we did the design and the green building and the rating part also for this project. So if you look at it, the dorms were key spaces where children spent most of their time. So it was important that the dorms, were sufficiently shaded, had access to adequate daylight and views. And it was also important to capture the wind draft, because corridor spaces were important and children spent a lot of time in the corridor. So we ensured that the corridor spaces could capture the wind draft. The glazing elements, the glass components were adequately shaded with facing the north and south. and the east and west were buffered with toilets and other services. So what we were able to achieve, if you actually look, we had a bit of solar also. We were able to achieve 20% savings without solar, and about 76% of the spaces had access to daylight and 100% had access to views. This is a school in Chennai, Maraimala Nagar, Ela Green School, which we did everything for. And if you look at this, the built-up area is about 86,000 square feet. It's a mixed mode building where it is air conditioned and naturally ventilated. So here we did the architecture, green and everything. It's a platinum certified building, LEED platinum. And if you look at this, again, I said, no, we do a design chariot. We sit at the design table. And this is one of our initial sketches, if you see. We wanted to bring in passive systems. So how do, it is a precast construction, we use precast technology here. So we had to see if we could bring in vertical shafts right to the roof, have turbo fans on the top to create negative pressure, so that we are able to increase the air changes in the classroom when it's naturally ventilated. So because we know in a classroom when a child sneezes, if we have enough air changes only, that infection is not going to linger in a classroom. And mind you, this building was designed much before the COVID pandemic. It was in 2017 that we designed this, and it just seems that right now it is the most suitable in given the current scenario. So we have a good design would be having 4 air changes per hour. When I say 4, that means the quantum of air that gets completely replaced in 1 hour will be 4 times. But we have been able to achieve around 10 air changes per hour. So which means, you know, the chances that a child is exposed to infection is minimal. So yeah, this is one aspect of the design. And we use, if you're looking at energy, we looked at how we can bring it, you know, double glazed units. There is double glass for performance only on those facades that are exposed to sunlight. How we ran the energy analysis, how did we decide the shape? If you look, there are pockets of spaces in the building plan. Again, this is basically for sunpath analysis, so that there are shaded pockets at any given time during the day. So if you look, this is the final design that happened. And all the classrooms are modular, again, the precast system. So at any given point in a day, you will have access to some shaded play area. Because smaller children, today we realize that temperatures are extremely high and we still want them to play outside. So to make it more convenient for the younger age group. So looking at the orientation, if you see this, this is the site, and we've designed the building such that there is no direct radiation on the facade of the building. So there are corridors or there are pockets, self-shading of the building. Only 1 or 2 facades will have direct shading. If you look at the window to wall ratio, we were 31% of glass on the facade. If you see the analysis, daylight analysis that we have done in the classroom, first classroom that was designed, if you see on the left side, there is not, the blue area is 300 lux or more. That is the NBC standard that says the amount of adequate daylight in a classroom. If you see, there are a lot of dark portions in spite of the window to wall ratio that we have given. So what we do is, we made the doors on either side, which were supposed to be solid doors, we made the corridor doors also glass to bring in adequate diffuse daylight in the classroom. So this is how design analysis helps us. If we don't do this, you would have ended up creating solid doors, then you will sit in the classroom, realize you don't have daylight, then turn on artificial light. So all this, to avoid all this, is where we do our scientific analysis. Materials, we've done insulated, what do we say, insulated panels. So if you see, the green is extruded polystyrene foam. I think we've done a 60 mm on the roof and 40 mm insulation in the walls. What is it that we were able to achieve? We've done the passive system, the shafts, we have green walls, we added insulated panels, we've had a combination of both double glazed units and single glass. We were able to achieve a 9-degree differential between the outside and the inside. Okay, this is a lot. This is without air conditioning systems. The third is your Coal India corporate office building, and again I show you. If you see the shading elements here, if you see there is the windows and there is a reflective glass layer also. So this was again the architect's beautiful idea of not having to use blinds inside the open office, because already the floor plate is so designed to make sure there's daylight from both sides. But along with daylight, there'll be glare also. Then what is the purpose of having windows? The best example would be if any of you have come to Chennai and have seen the Zoho building on that GST road. It is a circular building with glass, but if you go past that building, it will be completely with what is it? Blinds. Blinds would have been used fully. So what is the purpose of having glass? So again, all these are small design aspects that we can think of at design stage. Therefore, reflective glass was used as shading elements. And you can see that in the facade itself. It's a 250,000 square feet building. Again, I told you about the depth of the floor plate and stepped floors. I spoke about all this earlier. Again, here they used high performance glass. We used aerated aerocon bricks and overdeck roof insulation for building materials. And also they use water cooled chillers as, because that has more efficiency in air conditioning systems than air cooled. So what we were able to achieve is about 60% savings with solar. The system, they had about 140 kilowatt panels of solar integrated into the building design itself. Then we had 42% without solar, about 78% with daylight spaces. And usually when it's a large building, which is close to 3 lakh square feet, it's very difficult to achieve more than 75% of the space with daylight, because it's not possible to give glass all over. But yes, they were able to achieve with minimal glass, maximum daylight and 100% access to views. So I'll move on to one more case study, like just to show you how the design process happens. Okay. This is a small project, 30,000 square feet in Chennai. Here we did the architect being Katche and Associates. It was the client was very keen on an analysis prior to design. So we did an analysis that, if you see, this is the image. This is the image. This is how the building was given to us, a basic block model, and told us how all can we come up with analysis to achieve an optimal solution. So because it's a small site, a constrained site, so we did various options. We gave a solar canopy because anyway, 25% of the roof area had to be set aside for solar as per CMDA norms. So what we did is I'll just show you. Yeah. So we did 9 cases where we started with as is case and moved on to a best case scenario. So we gave various options, how the building in terms of materials, glass, roof, wall. We did a lot of options. And between case 1 to case 9, if you see, this is the worst case scenario. We are consuming 954 megawatt hours per annum. Okay. And in a best case scenario with the solar canopy and all, we are consuming 620 megawatt. I'm sorry, best case scenario is case number 8, which is the 459 megawatt hours per annum, which is 50% energy savings immediately. But again, there are certain restrictions, the pricing, the costing, and also most importantly, the client wanted the first few floors to be clear glass. Because it's a retail space, there had to be visibility from the outside, all of that. So what happens? We had some restrictions there. So we did a combination of glasses, high performance and clear glass. So the best possible optimal we were able to achieve is 620. That is still a 35% odd reduction from the. So this is how analysis will help us in achieving a green building or a sustainable building, energy efficient building. So what I would like to say is that there is no one best way to do things. How we define our goals, what is the architect's inputs, what is the client requiring, the client requirement, like I said, if it's a retail space, you want it to be completely visible. So the most important is how you how you follow the integrated design, how you follow the right approach is the most important, and what we are able to achieve in the process. If you have any doubts, let me know, or you want me to stress on something or another case study, let me know. Because I think the session is still one. We have another 15 or 16 minutes. So if you want anything, let me know. I can accordingly cover.
Thank you, ma'am. That was really an excellent session with more lively case studies, ma'am. So now the session is open for discussion. We kindly request the participants to unmute themselves and put for their queries. Ma'am, we have a question on the chat box.
Okay.
Is green building same as smart building?
Okay, smart building is where you're integrating a lot of technology, metering, monitoring, BMS, all of that. And it is a part of green building. A smart building is definitely a part of green building where you have your monitoring mechanisms in place. But they necessarily need not be synonymous. Is that okay? How can we make an existing building green? So this is where we have to audit the building. If there is a large, so when we do an energy audit or a green building audit, we look at certain measures. One is looking at small measures, the way they operate the building. So maybe your set point temperature, maybe maintenance, all those parameters are low cost measures. Then there is something where maybe your chiller itself is inefficient, maybe your glass is inefficient. Then there are high cost measures. So we usually do, and we can have a 5-year plan in how you can replace the high cost measures. Low cost measures, immediately after the energy audit itself, you can start. So when we do an energy audit or a building audit, green audit, and we give these recommendations, but the best way is to have a monitoring mechanism in place. When I say monitoring mechanism, it does not have to be a BMS. You can have separate individual manual meters, but there has to be a system where the building facility manager takes readings every month or every interval and records and see what is the water you consume, see what is the energy you consume, what is there a carbon footprint plan. So only if there is a full process in how you study the building and have a mechanism in place, you cannot focus on an existing building. Please elaborate on sequential analysis of existing buildings to be converted into a green building. So ideally, you would like to start with an audit, understand what the existing building has in terms of energy, in terms of, so what we usually do is we collect the energy data for the last 2 years of the building. So, and then we plug it into a platform called as ArcScoro, which will give you a scoring. Okay. It is again lead existing buildings. We use that platform. It will give you a scoring against a national average, against an international average, how your building is performing. We'll know whether your building is performing badly or it's okay. And then we come and physically study the building, every aspect, see the system, see the glass, see where the operations, how it is happening. So sometimes, 9 to 5 building, people don't turn off lights. People don't turn off after they leave the office. So even small areas like that can be minimized. Look at all these parameters, then come up with a full action plan on what needs to be done behavior-wise, that is occupant behavior-wise, operationally, what needs to be done. And thirdly, the high-cost measures, any replacements and all of that. Can you elaborate about wind towers in green buildings? So wind towers is, I think, one project we tried using small wind turbines because that building happened to be in the path of wind. But again, you have to check whether the extra large wind towers cannot be used. Small wind turbines can be used, but it's not as efficient as solar in our country. So for the same amount, you'd rather invest in solar. If you're looking at a renewable energy, I think solar is by far the most effective as far as we have seen. We still are yet to do a large scale wind powered system in a building. Is there any software? There are many softwares that can be learned for green building design. I would suggest looking at eQuest for energy, because eQuest is a free downloadable software and there are enough tutorials available online, or if there are a bunch of students who want to reach out, we do those trainings as well. You can look at daylighting software. There's Dialux that you can look at. There's Ecotect also that we use for daylighting on and off. Then there is CFD analysis. There's Design Builder. There are a lot of softwares, but to start with, look at daylighting and energy. CFD is one step ahead. We're looking at airflow analysis and all of that. But first, to start with, you can look at eQuest and perhaps Dialux for lighting, daylighting. Advice for an aspiring entrepreneur enter into green building market. Where should they go? See, I think first is to equip yourself with what is required to understand building in its totality and be qualified. So whether you're becoming a LEED accredited professional or IGBC accredited professional, register yourselves on various forums. The most important, I would say, is to be well versed with the ECBC. Once you start, and because that is a new field, that is where we're looking. Kerala is looking at empaneling consultants. In fact, we're doing Kerala. The thing is with government programs is when the empanelment is open, you make use of the opportunity. If you say in the next session, the next empanelment never comes. So in fact, in Telangana, the 30 people who have been empaneled for the entire state, out of 30 people, only 10 people know simulations. So only 10 people are doing the job for the entire state. So this is where I'm saying, it's important that you make use of, if any of you are interested in getting empaneled in Kerala training session, I can send the link to anybody who reaches out to me. Please register yourself if anybody's interested in Kerala. Right now we're doing it, and I focus myself on the south of India. So if any such opportunities arise, I will let you all know. Again, be updated on social media, look what is happening on BE website, you'll be aware. Is there any private government body who can guide us for converting existing building into green? Government doesn't do this. We can do this. Private people do it. There are consultants like us who convert existing buildings into green. You can reach out to us. I'll be happy to help you. Anyone else?
Any other questions from the participants?
Or anything else you want me to talk about also? So if we have time, I'm happy to detail it or explain further.
Ma'am, that is a request from the participants side to share the videos or any case studies with them.
Shall I share it as a PDF? If you send me an email ID, I can email it, or how do you want me to share it?
Ma'am, you can share in the Atal ICRA mail ID, ma'am. We'll calculate it.
I'll share that. You want this, and I'll share maybe one more case study that we have done in detail, which I don't know if I have the time to cover it now. But if you want me quickly, I can run through. It's the same school, but I'll talk about it a little more in detail if you are interested. Otherwise, I'll share the slides and you can see it. Any doubts, you can reach out to me again, no problem.
You can share the PPT, ma'am. We will share it with the participants.
Sure. I'll share 2 PPTs, today's session and the case study. Okay. My email ID is also in the PPT itself. So if anybody wants to reach out, please feel free to reach out.
Okay. Ma'am, we have a question from Rishabh. What are the certification points for using non-conventional construction materials like fly ash, plastic, glass, and CD waste?
So the whole section on materials is there. It is not, so you'll have to quantify what is the percentage of recycled content that you're using as against the total material value. So there are certain you have an Excel sheet where you document. So it's not just, you can't just say I've used the plastic tiles on the pavers and it's only 500 square meter. You won't get a point. Unless you take the entire construction material value and say 5%, 10% of the total value, you have used plastic or you have used fly ash, then you will get points in Griha IGBC. Now LEED has a slightly more complex system where they're asking for LCA analysis. So you need to know how to operate and calculate your LCA. And yeah, so there is a way to document how much you're using and understand. So unless a sizable amount of this is being used, just by using, you won't get points. How much of it you're using is important.
Any other questions from the participants?
I think Uma has asked something on passive ventilation. What exactly would you like to know, Uma?
We request Uma to unmute herself and interact with the speaker, please.
You want me to detail what we have done, or
it is passive ventilation using wind towers, it seems.
So see, there are different ways in which you can work out the system. Again, depends on what location you are in. So what we did is we had these towers, not towers, we had shafts, and it was not a natural. It was also a combination of mechanical. We had mechanically operated turbo fans on the top to create the negative pressure. What wind towers do basically is that they have a shaft which goes on top, and it's a natural system. So the hot air, the hot air moves up automatically, bringing in space for the cool air. We applied the same system and made it faster. So if you have a bit of mechanical, creating a negative pressure basically to bring in cooler air. So you can design it however you want, depending on the location where you are and how effective these passive systems are. Most often than not, if you don't mix it with a mechanical system, these passive systems don't work very well. I don't know how many of you have actually done a case study or seen the PEDA building in Punjab. It's the Punjab Energy Development Agency building, which uses a huge, they spent a lot on this passive system. Unfortunately, in summers, the building inside will be hotter because the system doesn't work. In winters, the building inside will be colder. So it's very important how we study the building before you design passive systems.
Any other questions from the participants? Ma'am, we have one more question, ma'am. What is the difference in work between Griha and LEED?
So again, every rating system is asking for the same output. The process varies. Griha has site visits, okay, where they come and audit the site. Whereas LEED is based completely on documentation because most of the reviewers are sitting in America or internationally. You don't know who's reviewing the project. There are slight changes in the way the rating system is worked out. But both rating systems give priority to energy. LEED has introduced some parameters for health and safety. Again, it all depends on what your requirement is. I can't say one rating is better than the other. In terms of process-wise, as a consultant, I think LEED is an easier process as compared to Griha. But again, that's a very personal opinion. But both are trying to achieve the best possible outcome. Otherwise,
we have another question, ma'am. What is the meaning of performance window?
So it's called performance glass, not window per se. So here your glass is, there are three important properties of glass that we look at. I didn't touch upon this maybe because I thought it's a little too much. But one is you're looking at something called as the solar heat gain coefficient. Okay, SHGC. This is nothing but how much of direct heat gain is being allowed into that glass. So suppose I say my heat SHGC is 0.3. That means 30% of direct heat gain is coming into the building. If I say my SHGC is 0.7, that means 70% is coming. So the lower the SHGC, the better is your performance. This is called high performance glass. So mostly, if what happens when your SHGC is coming down, ideal SHGC is what? 0. So if it's 0 means 0 heat gain is coming. But what happens? You may as well use a brick wall. A 0 SHGC for glass is a hypothetical situation because daylight becomes 0. So we want lowest SHGC, but we want highest direct visual light transmittance. That is VLT. So if in high performance, this is high performance glass, where your SHGC is lower, but your VLT will be 39%, 40%. So there will be different options that are given to you by the manufacturer. He will say SHGC is 0.25, madam, or 0.19. And if you only look at that, if you look at VLT, it will be 9%. That means only 9% of daylight is coming into your glass. You may as well not have glass. So how you choose your correct glass is called, so performance glass is basically better performing, better thermal properties, higher VLT, lower SHGC. There's also one more on U value. U value is a measure of the conductive heat gain, whereas SHGC is a measure of the radiative heat gain, the radiation heat gain. I hope it wasn't too much. It's all basic physics actually. It's just a revision of what we would have learned in 8th grade. Is there any subsidy by government to construct green buildings? Houses, no, not individual houses. But large complexes, residential complexes, I think the interest rates are lower for green in some institutions. FSI is increased for builders in some states. In Tamil Nadu, there's nothing.
I hope there are no more questions. Ma'am, it was really an excellent session, ma'am. We thank you so much for being here and being a part of the faculty development program. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much once again for having me over.